Hello everyone, and welcome to this section of the course where we are going to discuss something called as object-oriented programming. Now, before we get to that, let me tell you one thing that these concepts you might have, as a beginner, you might not have heard about them, but just keep some patience. You might have to come back to this and refer to this particular lecture as we are going to go through the course. So this is the first step wherein we are going to get some kind of a glimpse as to how a language is formed, what are the instructions that we provide in what format, and what's the theory behind this paradigm called as object-oriented programming. So before we get to exactly what an object-oriented programming is, let's look at what's a language, because we spoke about something called as a object-oriented language. Now VBA is a language. So what's a language? You give a set of instructions to an application, and the application processes your information and gives you the certain results. So there are two assumptions here. You should know the language understood by the application, and the application must be able to understand your requests and translate them into the desired results. Now to achieve that, the instructions, or you provide those instructions, they would have three major components in any kind of a programming language. One is what needs to be done, an action. You desire a certain action through your VBA scripting, so that would be the action. In other words, in our normal language, an action is something like a verb. Like if I want a pen, so I'll tell someone that please give me the pen to write. Now, writing is an action. Okay, so that is on that describes the action that I want to do. So I am a noun, I'm an object. The person whom I'm asking is another person, like an object. Just think about it. Just try to look at it from a perspective of a noun. So a thing by whom is a thing, and what you need to do is an action, and when and how. I want a pen, but what kind of pen? Is it a blue pen? So that's an adjective. Blue is something that describes a pen. If I give you a name and I want you to get that particular thing, so I'll tell you, okay, so and so, can you give me that particular pen? So we are also going to have something called as your adjectives that describe that particular object. At the same time, the action, writing, giving, all those things. In a similar fashion, you have got something called as objects in a computer programming language that will encapsulate your entire information and put it in a structure that the computer can understand. And once the computer understands that, through a compiler, through certain other details that actually process this information, you would get the results. So let's look at something called as what's an object in the first place. So think of object like a data structure. Let me just simplify it a little bit more. Consider it like a book. Okay, a book, if you can see here, this is a book which is having all information that's contained within it. Similarly, an object is an abstraction of something, and that something has some information contained within it. Think of it of your daily type of object. Like you see a laptop, a bike, a basket, a spoon, a pen, and so on and so forth. We know exactly what those objects are. We have given them a name. We know the usage for those objects. If you can see, like you have a car that can be driven. You have a laptop or a screen that you can actually view and manipulate. You have a clock. So these are all objects. Those objects have certain characteristics. They have certain things that we do. Similarly, in Excel, we need to first of all identify what in the universe of objects, for example, a workbook, a sheet, we have to identify those things. And then we have to also create or have an understanding of what are the various descriptions of those objects are. What are the interactions? What are the object? What do those things do? For example, an object like a workbook will have a property or an adjective like a name. Similarly, there are certain things that an object or a workbook can do, like one can open or close a workbook. One can protect a workbook. One can unprotect a workbook, so on and so forth. In this particular way, identification of those objects and creating some kind of interpretation amongst those objects is what we are going to achieve. So identify those objects in your Excel universe, assign properties to them, assign qualities to them, assign adjectives to them, and also understand the relationship and use and the methods and verbs that qualify for that particular kind of object. Let's take some example of a property. That's something like an adjective. We spoke about a blue pen some time back. So a car in your normal in a normal day-to-day life will have a property called color. Similarly, a pen will have a property of color, and a microwave will have a property of color again. So color is not one property. You can have several properties. A car can have a make, a name. A car can have age, and now age is a property. Now car can be 10 years old, a pen can be 4 years. So you have those properties. Similarly, functions. A car can be driven. So drive is a verb that describes what the car can do. You have to drive a car. Then you can write. So you have property, you've identified those objects, you've assigned certain properties to them. And then there's something called methods and verbs. For example, you can drive a car, right? And we just spoke about that. So when we speak about your objects, then we assign some properties. These are, you see these objects on top, this is nothing but like your nouns. Then you have properties which are like objectives, like type of pen that you're going to have, the type of the color that you're going to have a car, so on and so forth. And of course the methods that are there. So in this particular way, we first of all identify the objects, create a relationship, have the properties or the adjectives, and also create those verbs or methods for that. Till now we saw singular objects, but we have a concept of collections. Now what's a collection? We spoke about a book, we spoke about a car, we spoke about a pen, but in VBA or in programming languages in general, you also have something called as collection. Now collection is a type of object which is in multiples of a base object. Like you have got a shelf that is a collection of books. Like a car is a collection of so many other components that you can see. And a showroom, for example, is made up of multiple cars. So its collection is like a container. So it contains the objects that are stored in it. So you can actually go and access that. Like you go to like an index, okay, like you have in a car, you put it in brackets in 0, 1. So if you have n number of cars stored in the showroom, you can refer to each one of those using an index. So in this particular example, we have seen something called as a collection. So largely we have got collection objects properties that form the basis. Now let's come to an excerpt of the Excel as an application itself. Now if you can see in the slide, the Excel application contains workbooks. For example, when you open an Excel program, you will have a workbook that will open. Now workbook is a single sheet, but then you can have multiple workbooks. So the multiple workbooks or workbook object will be contained within a workbook collections object. Each one of those, be it an Excel application, will have properties and methods. Similarly, for a worksheet, you will have properties and methods and so on. And then you've got something called as a range. Now a worksheet contains a range of cells, like you have A1, B1, C1. So a range basically depicts a certain area in your worksheet wherein you do some kind of data analysis, you do some kind of operations on the data. So that's something basic about how the object-oriented programming is presented. Now if I have to give an example, if I were to write something in a worksheet, for example, I would first need to tell the Excel application to go to the right workbook, to go to the right worksheet, and then in that worksheet, write in that particular range. So you see how many interactions are happening at what level, how many objects are being called, how many methods are being. So whenever we are going to give an instruction, like if I'm going to tell someone to please get me the blue pen. So first of all, I need to identify that person. I need to identify the thing. I need to identify the objects and the methods. Similarly, when I'm going to give any instruction in a programming language, I need to do a similar thing. So I hope this is clear. In the next lesson, we are going to look at a practical implementation wherein you're going to write something through this whole hierarchy. So you'll know exactly how a particular instruction is provided. And that will be our first step towards writing the VBA code. Thanks a lot.